I've been involved in APIs for a long, long time. I used to be the founder of 3Scale, which was one of the biggest API management platforms, and spent a lot of time at Red Hat after that as well, and really from the beginning of the space. And I'm presenting today on behalf of Kin Lane and myself. Honestly, Kin Lane deserves the maximum praise for this because he's the one who's been writing most of the code on the back end of this. And I'm going to talk about API discovery, standards, publishing, and search. Really, APIs have obviously made a massive change to the way the internet works. It's a really incredible way of connecting systems together. It's only going to get more important with AI and the kind of levels of automation that we're getting to. But discovery is still really hard. So that's really what we're talking to in this talk. And APIs.io is actually something which is coming back, because APIs.io is a service that we launched at 3Scale many years ago, so in around 2012, I believe. And it was an open source search engine for discovering APIs. And that also went with a format that would describe those APIs, so you could basically make that discovery. And it ran for many years. People would list their APIs there. It didn't get a lot of love, unfortunately, because there were many other things that we had to do. And it disappeared a couple of years ago, but now we're bringing it back, and we think it's a great time. We're really happy to be here talking about this now, having brought the service back, and we'd love to engage in conversation about how to make the format more useful to people and how we get many search engines like this. So that's really what the talk is about. So I'm going to kick off, and again, special thanks to Kin, because he's really been doing the hard work behind this, and I'm focused getting the PowerPoint out there and a bunch of other things that are maybe not quite as valuable as what he did. So first of all, API specs. It's been a huge change to be here from even 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. There's just so much more spec adoption. So many more APIs are actually described in a digital manner. Many more APIs have all the information you would expect for developers and documentation and interactive systems and testing and so on. So it's just a huge benefit that all these specs have brought. And there are many more than I have here on the screen, but really, really big shout out to these organizations, and especially I would say to the OpenAPI organization that really kind of made a lot of this happen and inspired some of those other things as well. So getting these specifications for the APIs that people are using is a huge win. It allows tools to be created, it allows tests to be run, it allows SDKs to be created, and so on. So it's a really, really, really big step forward that we've seen. But it's still quite incomplete, I would say. It's still very difficult to find APIs and find all this great spec data for them. And as you'll see, that finding that great spec data is actually a really key part of what hopefully comes next in the API-powered web and internet. Specifically, a lot of the descriptions that you find, they may be in a particular format, but they're kind of broken sometimes. They're not maybe up to date with the API itself. They may have errors in them. They may break, they may not parse, or they may parse, but really have a lot of missing information. So that's kind of a downside. The second downside is the search experience is pretty broken, like finding these things. We'll talk about directories of APIs in a second, and they're doing a great job, but it's a very hard job that they're trying to do. And search certainly doesn't work well. If you go to Google and search for APIs, you will find them, but you'll primarily find the human readable parts rather than the actual API formats themselves, and you have to go digging for those in a pretty complicated way. And that's something that Kin and I have gotten pretty good at, but still it's hard to do. And also, it also means you'll find the APIs that are doing a great job of SEO to try to attract your attention within Google. Google is really not focused on giving you APIs, it's giving you sort of the most relevant human readable content, which is not always what you want here. So let's kind of step back a little bit. We kind of browse directories or lists of APIs, primarily because we can't index and search. So the API web can't be crawled in the way the human readable web can. The reason for that is APIs don't really link to each other, right? If you think about the human readable web, it's great. Someone writes a web page, a bunch of people link to that. That then becomes something that Google and other search engines can index, and they can basically traverse the human readable web and reach all those connected parts. That doesn't occur with APIs. People sometimes even don't link to the description like an OpenAPI or something they have for their API, just because they share that in some other way. It might be in a PDF document or sent by email or those kinds of things. Or maybe sometimes they don't want it to be even found because they don't think it's valuable or it might not be up to date and so on. So there's a lot of reasons why indexing the API web is a lot more difficult than indexing the human readable web. And this actually happened before. This happened with the generation of web services that came before REST APIs. So if you go back to the SOAP days, there were projects called like UDDI that tried to build directories for web services. And there was a format called WSIL, which was sort of metadata for where those web services might be. And that's just the kind of solution that we were inspired by when we looked at what we're going to talk about next. And really, if you think about it, there are really two ways of finding APIs in general. So one is directories. So these are things like Rapid API and API Guru, which try to index and list all the APIs that they know about. And you as an API owner can go to the directory and go and fill in your data so that people know where to look. And they're doing a kind of tremendous job given how hard that job is. Programmable web back in the day was sort of the OG version of the directory that no longer exists, but it's a really tough job to keep stuff up to date. It's also hard for API owners because they have to keep things up to date. So how do you actually make this a little bit better? What you really kind of want to think about is being able to find those APIs automatically, or at least update the data automatically. So this means knowing where the APIs are that you care about, for example, on a given domain. So if you were to go to IBM.com or Microsoft.com or Google.com, where would you find the APIs? Now, Google obviously has its own discovery tools, but it's very rare that any other company would have that. So first of all, you need to find them. And secondly, you want to provide an interface to search over that data that you're collecting. Another thing you would like to do is update that data regularly, just like Google would do for a web page. And that's very hard to do if your database is really a set of directories that people are manually entering data into. And some of the directories obviously do background data collection, but still, the system is really not designed for that. And the APIs that are in there, it's pretty ad hoc as to where the structured data and the formats are. So we want to do the thing on the right, but we're doing the thing on the left because the thing on the right relies on the fact that everybody has this metadata out and available. So it's a chicken and egg problem. We really see this as a community problem. It's something that is a resource to be built to have all this metadata out there. So how do we make it happen? And that's really the question we want to answer. So we do think this is possible. So we created a format called APIs.json. You can go to APIsjson.org to go find out all about it. There are specs there that tell you how to write this file. And the idea is that you put the file into a root domain that you have, and it points to all the APIs on the domain. Not only the developer portals, but also things like the OpenAPI spec, or if it's another kind of API, whatever specs are available for that API, you would point to. And then on the other side, we have APIs.io, which is a location you can go to search over those. And right now you can submit your APIs.json file, and what APIs.io will do is pull that data in and index it and basically produce the search results for you and build up that database. And APIs.io will also be open source so that anyone can run one of these search engines. It's a little bit tricky because right now we're running it on AWS in a way that we still need to do some extraction and so on, but there will be open source versions of this available. And also the search index will be available. So we'll basically allow anyone to basically pull the entire search engine and start their own search index as well. So the idea is, as you can see, that rather than having this idea that each API owner is going to go and update many directories to tell the directory what's changed on their API, we really want to make it so that all they need to do is update their APIs.json, and then any search engine that has that APIs.json location listed will be able to pull all that and grab it and put it into whatever search mix they want to. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of this, and then we'll do a short demo and kind of get toward the close of the presentation. So for API owners, why would you want to do this? Well, there's a really obvious reason right at the top there, which is just having one place where you publish your API information, ideally even in an automated way, right? So when you update your APIs and you update your OpenAPI spec, for example, have that published, but then also update everybody that's listening or watching for your API just in one place, and not have to go to all these different locations where the API might be listed. It also, I think, brings you better spec discipline. So ideally, you would automate this. And hopefully it'll get you in the habit of actually updating all of the specifications that matter for your API and doing that on an automated basis whenever you publish. And the last one I think is particularly important, which is that we're already seeing things like ChatGPT and many of the other AI technologies that have emerged over the last year. We're already seeing them call APIs and do things with those APIs, basically take actions. And this kind of automated use of APIs is really going to be a really big feature of what AI is able to do. And I think all of us that run APIs would want our APIs to be as automated to use as possible. So the more we do this, the more the data is up there and the more it's up to date, I think the more chance that your API will be used. And you can start to set the rules for how easy it is to basically use your API on an automated basis. I hopefully ultimately we'll get to the point where someone can sign up for and use your API without ever having a human having to do that. But that's probably a little bit further down the road. So for API owners, really the point here is publish it once and update everyone at the same time. For users of APIs, you also really want an authoritative, trusted place where the API specs are and have them be the same. You wouldn't really want to find the same API in 3 different directories and have slightly different data and not know which one was correct. You also want that to be regularly updated. So if we have this APIs.json search engine pairing, then you'll essentially be able to say, okay, whenever that APIs.json is updated, that's when new API information is available, and those search engines can poll that information and update themselves on some automated cycle. Automated discovery is obviously the case, so APIs.io already has its own API, so you can call it, do the searches, and hopefully there'll be lots of search engines that basically draw on that same data, including potentially very specialized personal search engines that just care about some particular criteria that you care about. We also hope that people will then augment the data, so you may imagine that people are doing API uptime type of things, checking the uptime of what's available and publishing that information. So really kind of juice up that ecosystem of information that's available for the APIs you might want to use. So we're going to do a very short demo. It's super simple. The site is still very basic. It's a not-for-profit effort that we're doing here. Again, shout out to Kin. So APIs.json, APIsjson.org is the place to go to find out about the format. It's really very easy to use. There's some examples, and then we have the spec versions. The spec is maintained by Kin and myself. We're absolutely open to changes. In the future, if it gets wider use, we'd certainly consider putting it into some kind of foundation, either one that's already existing or something else. Right now, I think we want to be agile and try to move as fast as we can. The spec has been around for quite a long time, so it has evolved and gotten better, I think. There's quite a few people using it in various ways, so we're a bit sensitive to that, obviously. But we hope that as usage grows, more and more people will contribute, and then we'll be able to evolve the spec. So go to APIsjson.org just to see what it's about from a spec point of view. I'm now going to go to APIs.io, so I'll delete this for a second. So APIs.io has a whole bunch of things, has the homepage where you can just search, there's some about information, you can also browse the APIs that are available, and rules I'll talk about in a second. And you can also add your own API. And there's also a development portal. So if I go here, for example, you'll see all the APIs that are available and basically can find out what it is that you can do with the APIs, such as drawing down the whole index and so on. So I'm going to give you an example. So I had it already here. So if I do DNS, right now, basically, you're able to search the whole database. So I find, for example, this DNS check, and take a look at that. And that goes straight to the API itself. So as an API owner, this is very much like just click on the blue link and go there from Google. But there's something else, which is this info tab here. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to open that. And this is still very, very basic in terms of formatting. But this is the information that APIs.io has extracted from the APIs.json. So we basically can now see some information that's been extracted. So sign up forms and blog, for example. And there's also a rating. So here, we're also hoping to help people improve the quality of their APIs. So this gives you a score. We'll see some other scored things in a second. And these are the things that we've detected in the APIs.json that are available, that are useful. And you can actually go and view all of the rules that make up the score. So there's lots of things to do with the information that's available. Are the properties available? Is there a change roadmap and so on? There's a lot of things that would make APIs more useful to people. And our objective actually with the search engine, at least by default, is going to be that you'll rank more highly if you actually complete more of these things. So, and you wouldn't be surprised, for example, Twilio, if I go to Twilio, most of their APIs have many of these items already complete, also not completely complete, so that's the API itself. If I go to info, we'll actually see that score for Twilio is quite a lot higher, 325 in this case. So if you were searching for an API that was doing video, slightly that Twilio will rank higher than other things. Of course, other search engines might do completely different things, right? But our objective here is basically make the API web available to people for search, and we'll keep improving the search experience. Right now, it's all very simple. Other people can do other search experiences, but we want to encourage people to use the format so that all of these things are possible. And the rules, as we said, it really helps people get a feel for how well maintained is this API, does it have all the things available that you would expect, and so on. And that is an important criteria that people ask us all the time when they're asking us about which APIs that they want to use. You can, of course, also browse through the APIs in a basic way. Again, there's lots of formatting and things that we can do here, which we haven't done yet. But that's a very brief overview of how the tools work. And yeah, basically, the whole objective here is to produce what's hopefully going to be a useful search service that consumes this data. We certainly see opportunities as well for people to run this kind of search engine within their organization if they just want to discover the local APIs, for example, and that obviously might have a bunch of different needs. But the real objective here is that let's start using a format to do this in a more organized way than happens today. So I talked about the demo. We did that a little bit. I'm going to sort of wrap up a little bit with where we go from here. And you might ask what it is that we're trying to achieve, right? Is it the left thing on the left side? You know, we create a format that's proprietary or whatever, or we create it, then we do APIs.io, eventually we make tons of money. Of course, we're not averse to making money, but really our objective is not that at all. We really want to make the API web better. We've come such a long way in the last 10 years in terms of spec use and so on. But I think there's still so much more to do. We can make better specs, we can make discovery better, we can support automation in a better way, and we can use ratings and rankings also to help drive that improvement process. So that's really the goal here, and the format is completely open, anyone could use it. Ultimately, if there's enough interest, we would obviously do that in some more formal way, but right now, most people seem more than comfortable for us to do this in terms of us managing the process, and we're happy to do that. And so really the goal is here, let's try to make something that's commonly useful and just go that little step further than we currently have in terms of using specs. So we'd really love for people to try this. There's also a page, which I didn't show on the demo, you can go to put in your API data and it will generate you an API.json, so it should be really easy. And you can then list it in the search engine, it'll be part of the index. Tool vendors, we would love to see more tools that create APIs.json by themselves, maybe from build process for APIs. And then repositories that are out there already, that are already trying to index this data, we would love for them to also look at maybe benefiting from the data. So obviously they all have their own decisions to make, but we would love that to be the case, that maybe APIs.json augments the data that those services already have and makes them stronger and better. And last of all, we'd love feedback on any parts of this from anyone in terms of helping make it better. There are, as I mentioned, a lot of repositories right now where you can go find API data. They all have great things, you know, from the Rapid API site to Postman Community and APIs Guru. There are also some examples of tools that already use open APIs.json. So big shout out, just as one great example of Kyoto. So Daryl from Microsoft pointed this out to me. So if you tag a GitHub repository that's public with Kyoto, then it will actually also get indexed in their collection of APIs. So that's really cool. That's a great use of this kind of tech. The more of that we see, the better. And what are we going to do from here? Our plan is to run the search engine and just improve it over time. obviously evangelize the idea a little bit, especially the use of the format, whether for the search engine or for other things. Update the spec as people find things that need to change. And our plan is to open source the engine so anyone can write a search engine. Although honestly, there are many ways to write the search engine, right? Once you know the format, you may well do a way better job than we can. So the more that happens, the better. And we'll keep working on the rating system. That's another thing we'd love feedback on. It is our way to encourage people to improve the amount of data out there. But it's also very useful to start looking at what kind of data people do find valuable and what they actually already put out there today, so that certainly can inform that rating system. And yeah, with that, some thanks and some links. So here are the links to APIs.io itself. Here's the link to add a new API. Then there's the developer site. Down here, obviously, some of the formats. There's many more, but please also keep using those specs. That's kind of what the lifeblood of the API web is. And a special thanks to some of the folks on the right, especially Nicolas, who wrote the original APIs.io search engine. And he's been cheering us on from the sides. And some other folks, Mike and Daryl, have definitely been influential over the years and kind of pointing things out to us. We're also aware that APIs.json may not be the perfect format, right? There's other ways to do that. If other things emerge that are widely used, then I think search engines could latch onto those as well. So there's not really a desire that it must be absolutely this format, but there really hasn't been another format available. So we really think we should pick one, get as far as we can, make it as good as we can, and then we'll see from there. And OpenAPI, I think, has for many years now sort of been a leading light in just getting people to put the kind of automated descriptions out there that we really need. And kudos to everyone in that community who keeps doing it. And also a special thanks to 3Scale and Red Hat, who initially created this search engine. We created it during 3Scale days, but obviously Red Hat now is, 3Scale is now part of Red Hat. So yeah, it's giving a second lease of life, and we'll see where that all goes. And happy to take questions from people. This is the recorded version, so I won't be live, but feel free to leave things on the YouTube video or contact either Kid or myself. We will add a contact mechanism on the site as well, so that people can reach out with questions. And we're looking forward to see what everybody does with it. Thanks very much.